closed session. Can I have a mover and seconder for the following? That the committee move into closed session at 7:23 to discuss matters pursuant to section 239(2) B, C, and D of the Municipal Act 2001, RSO 2001, C25 as the subject matter pertains to a personal matter about individuals, including municipal or local employees, or proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board and labor relations or employees. Although I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Taylor and Mayor, I guess I was going to call you Mayor again, Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Okay, we're moving into the other, it better be coming.
I would never.
Okay, after closed session, we now need a mover and a seconder to adjourn the closed session at 8:03 p.m. and reconvene in open session. I need a mover and a seconder, Councillor Columbus and Councillor Rabbit. All those in favor? Moving on. Okay, I've got to get the rest of the back where I got to go. I find it, don't worry. Okay, now B. And B has been changed, hasn't it? Very bottom, okay. G, what is this one? Hang on, staff report ECA 17. Okay, that's the one we wanted. Okay, staff reports, discussion. Staff report ESC 1917, re-sole source purchase, coordinated, Jesus, I can't get it around, advertising. Moving on from there. Shelley, where'd you go?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, there you are.
The purpose of this report is to seek approval for a sole source supply with Sun Media for weekly newspaper advertising, and that's subject to negotiating the same terms and conditions for up to 1 year. As Council is familiar with, the county's newspaper advertising program has all Norfolk County ads grouped together under the How to Contact Norfolk County banner, and it's posted in the Wednesday publication of the Simcoe Reformer, the Thursday publication of both the Delhi News Record and the Lakeshore Shopper. With the recent addition of the Communications Department, staff are further recommending that staff be directed to provide a detailed review of the coordinated advertising program to determine current and future needs, statutory and public notice requirements, program responsibilities, and potential cost savings for both print and digital requirements. We expect to have this report to Council before the end of the year in effort to find some cost savings for next year's budget. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair Geisens, and through you. I'm just curious if this report will include options regarding social media advertising as well.
Through the chair, that's an excellent point. We have a digital strategy credit as part of this program, so you can expect a social media component of that report as well.
Excited to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Taylor beat me to it. Social media for sure. A couple other things. I'm going to tell a very quick little story here. I would like to see the county switch, I'm keen on this report to come back. I'd like to see the county switch some of its focus on other types of advertising. I had an interesting conversation last night. Part of our rec program, Norfolk County has summer training for hockey camps for kids that are literally run by NHL hockey pros in our community, putting kids on the ice in the summertime, and people don't know about it. The numbers are dwindling. We have professional hockey players and athletes teaching the kids here in Norfolk County to train them in the camps, and last year 3 players from these camps were called up to the OHL. I don't play, thank you, Kim. And I think that that is a huge success story for Norfolk County. So I would love to see advertising money put behind a program like that that's so unique to what we do here in Norfolk County. So I'd be very keen to see that report and what some of the focuses we could switch focuses on. Additionally, I would like to just take advantage of this report and make a comment about papers in general. Across Norfolk County, as soon as I was elected, I started hearing from community members who were contacting bylaw regularly because they were blowing up their snow blowers, chewing up papers left in the end of people's driveways. We have a great working relationship with our paper here. We spend money advertising with them, and they're great. They cover all of our stories. We're lucky to have local news here in Norfolk County, but we're also spending a lot of staff time sending our bylaw, having bylaw call them and asked if we can mitigate some of these factors. I would love to have a conversation about the delivery, the litter, etc., with the papers at this time. And then my last comment would be a question to Ms. Darlington. Does this ever run over budget, the advertising?
Through the chair, it's a great question. The budget line is embedded in each of the departments. So we have guaranteed, as part of the program, a half page. So I would have to lean on my friends in finance to actually determine the budget overage or underage, is that a word? To confirm, because it pools all of it, the coordinated ad plus various other advertisements as well. But certainly during our review of the program, we can take a look at that and report back and give you some statistics.
Thank you. With so many budget amendments coming in, I'm quickly learning that, it's hard to keep the budget as set, and this would be non-negotiable. I would like to see this stick to the budget. I think it's one thing that would be able to control. Thank you.
Councillor Michele?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just a comment or question for Councillor Martin on her first point about the hockey programs and the advertising for those things. If I can respectfully ask, you said to switch. Do you mean like switch so we take something out and put that in, or do you possibly mean to add that as more of our advertising?
I have to be honest, I'm not an expert in what we currently advertise, but I wouldn't want to direct staff to remove something and put that in place of something, but I would like to just maybe put an emphasis on a few different things that we are offering, and special shout out to Rick Kowalski, who runs that program for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Van Passen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't believe I'm going to say these things, but like I'm the guy who still gets a subscription to the paper. I read the print one. That's how my brain is wired. That's what I'm used to, but I'd have to defer to the next generation down, because I think there's a lot better way to contact people. The subscription rate of the actual papers is getting lower every year. There is social media. The county website, is that still the original one from 2000? And it seems to be rather hard to find anything in there for me. Maybe we got to upgrade that, use that electronic media more, cut back a little bit on the other ones. Be looking for some advice from somebody who knows more about it than I do, but I think we're making that society's making that shift, and the good old-fashioned Lakeshore Shopper that's got that half-page ad, that's what I always look for, but I don't think that the majority of the population does that anymore, so might have to look at totally different venues, different outlets. We have some experts here that handle social media so much better than I do, so but I think it's time to make that shift.
Through the chair, if I may, that's the intent of the program review, to come back with some different strategies, find some cost savings, and see what we can do better in effort of saving some tax dollars.
Anything further? Councillor Columbus?
Yeah, I'm reading, Mr. Chairman, I'm reading page 53 here, the second paragraph from the bottom. It talks about the distribution to Norfolk County residents and zones, and it talks about Haldimand County, Oxford County, Elgin, but it excludes Brant County. And I'm just thinking the northern part of Townsend, former Townsend Township, and Wyndham, a lot of the people there, they actually get the Brantford Expositor. They don't get the Port Burwell News or Straffordville News. So I'm wondering why we're not targeting that area, being that it's more built up and there's a lot more well-developed businesses up there that might want to tender on our jobs. And it is hooked up with the Simcoe Reformer also, so can there not be some kind of a side deal made to make sure that these ads appear in the Brantford Expositor?
Through the chair, if we want to pursue the Brantford Expositor, that would be a change in scope and additional dollars. So we would like the opportunity to take a good review of the program and then report back to council for some further direction. However, I can indicate to council, with the current advertising in the three papers indicated, the Simcoe Reformer, the Lakeshore Shopper, and the Delhi News Record, every resident property owner in Norfolk County does receive that publication, those three, one of those three publications.
Further? If not, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation in the staff report. A mover and a seconder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rabbit, sorry. Holler at me. Are you moving it?
So moved as it's written on page 55
Yes.
of our agenda.
Seconder, Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to staff report DSC 1977, Re-Affordable Housing Options and Tiny Homes. Staff to present. Who's got it? Okay, where you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report comes forward from Council's request for information on tiny homes and affordable housing options on April 2nd of this year. This presentation will be touching on the following items: the housing action items, different types of tiny homes, the 2 ways to build tiny homes, and an option to consider, which is reviewing our accessory residential dwelling unit policies. This report is related to Goal 1 of the Norfolk Housing Strategy by encouraging a range of housing options. Staff have consulted with Housing Services to prepare this information report. There are 2 categories of tiny homes, one being on a foundation and the other being on wheels. Tiny homes on foundation typically fall under the definition of a single detached dwelling if they're the only unit on the property, or an accessory residential dwelling unit, whereas tiny homes on wheels typically fall under the recreational vehicle or mobile home definitions. The following are some examples of tiny homes on foundation and tiny homes on wheels. So the current situation in Norfolk County, starting with tiny homes on foundation, Norfolk County currently has no minimum dwelling size, which is something that in other municipalities can hinder the development of tiny homes. Instead, in Norfolk County, it defaults to the minimum dwelling size contained in the Ontario Building Code, which works out to about 145 square feet plus a washroom space. If a tiny home or on foundation is the only dwelling on a lot, it is permitted as a single detached dwelling in zones where a single detached dwelling is permitted use. As far as tiny homes on wheels, these are often seen as more a temporary housing solution, again being defined as recreational vehicle or mobile home. For tiny homes on wheels, MTO regulates the size for these units to be roadworthy as they're typically on a trailer. These units must meet the Ontario Building Code minimum size, that 145 square feet plus a washroom, and also meet CSA Canadian standards, Z240 for a mobile home. So there are 2 main ways to build a tiny home. One can either be as the main use on a parcel or as an accessory use to an existing residential dwelling. So tiny homes on a vacant parcel, again, they are permitted anywhere where a single detached dwelling is a permitted use. Subdivision or condominium applications could come forward to create lots for tiny homes. In addition, a zoning bylaw amendment could come forward to allow multiple dwellings on a lot if no subdivision was proposed. Typically, we see minimum lot sizes that are substantially larger than may be required for tiny homes, and allowing for reduced sizes could be addressed through a related zoning bylaw amendment application at that time. Norfolk County official plan policies support residential uses in urban areas, and as such, any applications coming forward as subdivision, condo, or zoning bylaw amendment in these areas would likely see approval. So the other option for tiny homes on a lot is as accessory residential dwelling units. Currently, these are only permitted within existing dwellings in Norfolk County. You might be familiar with the basement suite or an attic suite. And only in the urban areas, being Simcoe, Port Dover, Waterford, Delhi, Port Rowan, and Cortland, where there are municipal services. Accessory residential dwelling units are a viable option to increase the housing supply. The province encourages these uses and allows it in the main dwelling as well as in accessory uses to that dwelling. There is a potential to update local policies to allow accessory residential dwelling units in more forms and in more locations. On the slide here, you'll see different types of forms that accessory dwelling units can take. Just for your reference, forms A, B, and C, the top 3, if it pulls on the screen, show these types of units within the main dwelling, either in the basement on the main level or in an upper level. And the other three options show them in accessory dwellings. So these can either be as sole units in the form of a tiny house in a backyard, or a unit over top of a detached garage, or to the side of a detached garage. So there are some benefits observed from accessory residential dwelling units in other municipalities. These can be increasing the supply of rental housing, contributing to a broader range of housing types and tenures, providing a long-term housing solution for family members, particularly youth and the elderly, and allowing the elderly to age in place. These units can be a source of income for the property owner and can assist new buyers in purchasing a home. These units typically have reduced building costs. Development charges are proposed to be waived for accessory residential dwelling units as part of Bill 108. And you heard earlier tonight there may be some form of reduction in development charges for tiny homes if they're the sole dwelling unit on a property. So recommendations from this report, staff recommend the report be received as information and that council direct staff to look into updates or potential updates to our accessory residential dwelling unit policies to allow a broader range of these units in more places and in more forms in Norfolk County. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, planning staff. This was such a cool report. I loved it. Questions around one comment I wanted to make. I read here, which is a great suggestion about a grant for, I think it was in the tourism comments, I don't know what page. Great suggestion. I almost don't know if that's necessary. I think to create an environment where tiny homes or whatever we end up calling them kind of thrive in Norfolk County, and a reduction on development charges. I almost think that could be enough if we really get behind this and encourage it. So I like the suggestion, but I don't think it's totally necessary. A couple of your photos looked like they had sea storage containers as homes, and they looked so sharp. They looked Christmas lights on them and whatnot. Question to the planning staff, for a sea storage container to come into Norfolk County, is it true that we require drawings of what would be inside of it as part of an approval to planning?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, if a sea storage container were proposed for a dwelling, or if it was just used for storage, just to clarify the question.
I don't entirely know. I had just heard this and I wanted to ask you. So let's say if it was for a tiny home, for a dwelling, would you then need drawings of the structure, of the inside of the structure? Is that true?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct, just to ensure that it meets the building code for habitable space.
And my next question is the homes on wheels are not that much different from a trailer or a garden suite. I think that we would want more, in my personal opinion, I would want to advocate for a more permanent structure and take them off the wheels. But if they're on wheels, how can we look at taxing them? And I believe we'd want them on the ground to be able to tax them and hook them up to services. So in the same sense that we're looking at, we have been discussing garden suites and now tiny homes, making these more permanent structures, we would want to tax them equitably, whether it's a trailer or a tiny home. Can you speak to that at all or shed some light on that?
Through the chair, yes, there are some challenges with taxing mobile units as they are on wheels. Like you said, similar to garden suites, which are typically, approved on a case-by-case basis by council today. Certainly, the permanent structures would be taxable assets and then assessed through MPAC as such. You could wheel off a trailer any day, but if you have a foundation on the ground, it'll stick around for some time.
Thank you. And then my last question might be a finance one, I'm not sure, but I don't know how to word this properly. I'm going to call it a tax, but I don't know if that's the appropriate word. If we were looking at taxing these structures equitably, whether it's a tiny home or a garden suite trailer, is the municipality able to set a flat rate on it if there are one or two different sizes that maybe MPAC might not even recognize in a way? Are we able to essentially tax them equitably across the board, or is it just strictly going to have to be done through MPAC investigating each property that a tiny home would sit on?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin. So MPAC does certain studies or they research certain areas every assessment period, and you'll notice that in some of the assessments come back. For example, this last one, the farmland was sort of assessed a little bit higher than the other ones because they concentrated on that. Now, whether they go into something like tiny homes or not, I'd have to find out from MPAC if that's something that they're studying, or if there's perhaps they're going to be adjusting the Assessment Act for these types of homes. However, the general theory is MPAC assesses properties based on value, and that's the basis of how all the assessments are done. Is they look at market rates, they look at other avenues in a proper assessment. And so that would be how they would be that would be how they would be taxed, is basically their assessment, and it would likely be the residential rate that they're taxed with.
Councillor Michele. Columbus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, and I'll just ask Stephen, I think, to start. Stephen, in your slideshow, you're indicating the size of a tiny home is about 145 square feet plus a washer. In the report, it says 145 square feet, including a washer. I'm just wondering which one is correct.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Michele. The Ontario Building Code limits it at a minimum of 145 square feet, and then a washroom space on top of that.
Okay, so the report, that's a slight error. Okay, all right. And I guess just with regard to some other factual information, Mr. Chair, if I can. Stephen, it indicates in the report that the villages of Long Point Bay and Port Rowan is a tiny home community. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Michele, the point of that section of the report was to refer that there really is a hard time defining exactly what a tiny home and tiny home community is. Really, it's just typically smaller single detached dwellings than the average or what you normally see, unless there is a maximum put on it for whatever reason. So I think the point of that sentence was just to imply that, a denser compact development with smaller than your average size homes could be considered as a tiny home type community.
So because they were designed to be, able to fit into a certain space. Myself just having been standing in the front door of every single one of those houses, they look considerably larger than the 145 square feet. That's all.
Right. And through the chair, just to clarify again, that 145 square feet is only a minimum number. There is no maximum that's consistent across municipalities for what the maximum size of a tiny house could be. Kind of varies depending on what form it's going to take. That's kind of why we said the minimum, and maybe in the future we'll decide on what appropriate maximum may be.
Okay, thank you. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus, did I have you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few questions for Steve. The utilities, water, sewer, hydro, and gas, would they be separate? Would they have separate metering when you go to the tiny home situation?
Through the chair, there's different situations in different municipalities. Some places require that the services be fed through the main dwelling on a property if it's an accessory unit. In other places, they allow it to be kind of more free, whether it has its own services or whether it has to go through the house. That's kind of outlined at the detailed zoning stage.
So what would be the best for Norfolk?
Through the chair, we're hoping for council direction tonight to look into just that answer and review other municipalities and engage the public and see what their thoughts are on this as well.
Okay. So you've got a single-family residence on a lot already, and you want to put a tiny home in the back, convert my shed over to a tiny home, for example. Can you rent it out? You can rent it out to somebody? Is that the situation?
Yeah, through the chair, it's definitely an opportunity. Quite frankly, a lot of these units are used either as rentals or to accommodate some family member.
Okay. And can the garage be converted over to a tiny home? Like, say you had a two-car garage, 24 feet by 26?
Through the chair, that is an opportunity. Again, it has to be built up and modified to code. Very often we see these units maybe attached to a detached garage, while physically separate, it's kind of one structure, a detached garage, and then a separate unit attached onto that as well.
And how do you address the issues of parking? Like say, some homes already have 4 or 5 drivers in them, and then you put a tiny home there and you've got more issues with parking again where you can't clear the snow, and say you got garbage collection issues too. How would you address that in the tiny home scenario?
Again, through the chair, there are many municipalities that require about 1 parking space for every additional accessory unit. Currently, Norfolk County, for the basement units that are allowed today, it requires a minimum of 1 additional parking space for that unit. So say you had a single detached dwelling, you'd require 2, and then plus 1 for the accessory residential dwelling unit for a total of 3 off-street on the property.
Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very vague question to our planning staff, but you guys are close in age to me, so I want to throw this out there while you've been researching this. I know this will be some of the information you'd probably bring back, but while you've been building this report, what are your thoughts on what implementation in Norfolk County could like, and I specifically want to pick your brain on, should this be an initiative where we're putting a secondary dwelling on properties, or should Norfolk County kind of lead the way in something very unique here by picking a plot of land and piloting a subdivision area? Have you come across that in any other municipalities in your research, or do you have thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, certainly. Through the chair, both Neil and I have been kind of researching this topic over the last couple of weeks, and we just recently listened in on a tiny home webinar, which brought in people from across Canada last week. It was really interesting topics. There are a few municipalities that are looking at kind of finding a plot of land and testing out this tiny home community idea. Very often it's to address the needs of a vulnerable community, and maybe it uses the tiny homes on wheels more so than the permanent structures. As far as these units as accessory residential dwelling units, because of how strongly the province encourages these uses, and from a planning perspective, it really accomplishes a good goal of increasing the density of an area, providing a wider range of housing sizes and options and tenures for people, not just home ownership, but maybe rental opportunities. It is seen as a very popular and conducive way to kind of increasing the housing stock in already built up properties. So either option could be explored. There are a few places that are looking to go through individual tiny home communities, but the vast majority of municipalities have taken this accessory dwelling unit approach.
Okay, my final thought that I'm fully in support of this and I'm eager for the next report that I will leave you with would be the concept of maybe a small piece of land in Norfolk County that is a pilot area where we can put these tiny homes on and have more housing available to people. But I also wonder if this is a unique opportunity for Norfolk County to find young students out of college and out of university and draw them down here. There's affordable housing here, and we have a great community where you can bring your business and bring your startup and come and live in Norfolk County, and here's a residence for you to live in that's reasonably priced, and go from there. So although I support tiny homes in any way, shape, or form, I really have this idea of them being maybe on an isolated, on a piece of land together somewhere, and we leapfrog and market ourselves creatively with the bringing them into Norfolk County. So thanks.
Any further questions, Councillor Michele and Councillor Van Passen? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment about Councillor Columbus' reference earlier to a converted garage becoming a tiny home. Just also in Norfolk County, we call those man caves. Thank you.
What? Man caves. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming what staff is going to bring back would be like actual zoning regulations on a backyard, side yard, where something would fit, and the parking requirements. And a lot of the parking requirements, one of them is counting the garage as a parking space, so we got to be careful about converting those. And the concept of a condominium sort of development with tiny homes, would that include like a separate building that's like a common area, that if you had guests or something, would that be part of sort of what we would require you, or just plunk a bunch of them up and divide the land up? You know, those kind of things you're going to bring back to?
Yeah, certainly. Through the chair, we are hoping to do some more research over the summer, host a public engagement session, and bring back some more specifics on proposed changes and, maximum height regulations, size, area, parking, all that sort of thing. As far as your question about condominium, if an application were to come forward with that, it could be set up a number of ways, whether it has, a common building that's shared or just common land. It really depends on that specific circumstance, but it is an opportunity and an application that could come forward today.
So I know I've harped about this before, that we need to find a way to get low income or low rental prices for units for the single person who's making minimum wage. And like, we know how much it costs when we got to subsidize it, so we'd rather just have the private entrepreneur build it so that people can find places to live. But I can't get away without pointing this out to Councillor Michelli, but page 72, I see that Bill 108 has achieved royal ascension. That might have been a typo, right?
Councillor Cousins, yes, I noticed that, Councillor Van Passen, thank you.
Bills generally receive a royal assent, not royal ascension.
Unless they are holy.
Yeah.
A mover and a seconder, Councillor Martin and Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to staff report DS 1982, RE-TPL 2019-176 Silo Wireless Inc. Telecommunication Tower 1409 Townsend Road East. Staff to make the presentation. Who do we have? Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. This report is with respect to a telecommunications tower. The communications tower is located at 1407 Thompson Road, which is in the hamlet of Villanova. The intention of the report is to receive Council's affirmation with respect to the tower as part of Transport Canada's requirements for telecommunication towers. With telecommunication towers, the municipality does not give approval, but it's an acknowledgement by the municipality that there has been a request for erection of the communications tower. Through the process, there is a public open house that is held where the neighbors are circulated and there's an opportunity to ask questions. At that open house, there was no one in attendance to speak for or against the application, and as such, the report is brought forward to you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I move the recommendation is printed on page 85.
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Taylor. Okay. Any other questions or anything like that? Okay, I will go to that. That the application by Silo Wireless Inc., Andrews Witowski or something like that, I'm sorry, 19 Sage Street, Brantford, Ontario, N3R7T4, affecting lands described as part Lot 18, Concession 8, Geographic Township of Townsend, Norfolk County file number RTPL 2019176 be received as information for the reasons set out in report number DSC 19-82, and that Corporation of Norfolk County has no objections to the location of the telecommunication tower affecting lands described as 1409 Townsend Road East, Norfolk County. Do I have a mover and a seconder? You moved it? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to planning staff, does the county make any money on these towers? Is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe so. I'm not sure if there's any taxation that goes along with them. Mr. Johnson might be able to better associate that, but I don't believe there is any value to it.
Councillor Michele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my question about these towers, they're all described as, I guess to staff, as telecommunications towers. Are they primarily cell phone towers, or are they for wireless internet?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they do get kind of grouped together in terms of the telecommunications protocol through Transport Canada. It's my understanding they are for cellular communications. The proponent is here if you have anything, any specific questions on that regard as well.
Through the chair to council. It's for fixed wireless access for high-speed internet in the community. We're planning on bringing services such as IPTV, etc. We operate through Norfolk County as well as Brant County and as far as Kitchener to the lake. And it's specifically to bring high-speed access to rural homes. That's been our mission since day one. So since we've been doing it for about 13 years now. So.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, you can.
Through the chair to council, we have to allow it if somebody comes to us to go and install. So for example, in the local county here, if Quick came to me and wanted to actually go on the tower to co-locate, I could not refuse them as long as the tower structure itself has the ability to hold the extra equipment they would want to put on there to provide services, then yes, we could do so. We would charge them a lease rate, just as, for example, Bell would charge us a lease rate to go on one of their towers, or likely Quick would do the same. You're welcome.
Further? If not, all those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to report DCS 1983. That's a good one here. RTPL 2019180. Aquinet, Canada, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that. I'm not sure who they're here, and I apologize. On behalf of FL Smith Distributing Inc., Telecommunication Tower 178 Talbot Street. All the further questions? Yours?
Thank you, Chair Geisens. This is another telecommunications tower. This one is located at 174 Talbot Street in Cortland. Very similar proposal to the last report that was just presented. There was an open house as well for this one. There was no comments or concerns raised by any of the neighbors. And as a result, staff are supportive and have no concerns with the proposed location. Thank you.
Further? Councillor Columbus?
I will move the recommendation as printed on page 93.
Okay, seconder? Councillor Rabbit? All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the next one, which is staff report PW 1905, report to hire an engineer under section 4(1) of the Drainage Act for Cedar Ordinance petition. Who's got that one? Here we are. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to all of council. What you have here is a report for council to appoint a drainage engineer under the Drainage Act. To describe the situation simplest, if you go to attachment 1 of the staff report, I apologize, I don't have the page number for you. You see a little overview map. Essentially what's going on here is we've had some drainage issues in the area of Cedar Drive and Ordnance Avenue. There are no legal outlets for the county to drain through at this point. We have discussed this with roads operations, our municipal drainage services, as well as a number of the property owners in the area. As a result, what we are proposing here is to appoint a drainage engineer to look at the issue down here, determine the drainage area, and come forward with a potential solution to provide adequate drainage for this area. If you have any questions, I will gladly respond.
Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Jason, I'm looking at the map that you described, attachment 1, it's page 104, and there's a private/unknown pipe. Do you believe that through consulting with an engineer, we'd be able to determine if that pipe is in fact there, or who owns it, or if we could use that conduit, or is that something that's just acknowledging that, hey, we have this piece of infrastructure here, and that's about all we know about it?
Through the chair to Councillor Rabbits, that pipe we do know does exist. I believe it was 2016, staff went down and it was no longer draining. So the actual ownership and maintenance responsibilities of that are completely unknown. We did put some cameras down through there to try to assess the condition of the pipe. It has failed at least in one or more locations. It not having a legal right to go across that property or the M&R property along the lake shore is one of the reasons why we've gone through the process of petitioning for a municipal drain solution for this, because it establishes those rights of access.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that is my understanding as well, that that pipe was put in there previously by the municipality of the day, whatever municipality that was. There's no easement for it. It outlets through M&R's beach, and there's no easement across there, so we're not allowed to go in and fix it. And I think we've been working on an overall solution down there in Turkey Point, because that intersection all year has looked a lot worse than those pictures they had today about Long Point, and every time it rains it does that. There's culverts there that are running backwards since this spring as well. It just needs to be fixed, and I think we've been enlightened around this council table before that there's only about 4 certified drainage engineers that work in the province, so we've got one of them. I would move the recommendation and try to get going on this situation. It's only been 30 years that they started complaining about it, so.
Okay, I assume you're going to be the mover and the seconder. Councillor, Michele, any further? All those in favor? That is carried. Okay. I need a mover and a seconder. Second? By the notwithstanding section 4.10 of the procedural bylaw, council proceed past the 9 p.m. to address matters at hand. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Taylor? Councillor Van, I guess I should have changed it around, but you're on here.
We've got a few more to go.
All those in favor? That is carried. I'm getting there. Okay. So now we're moving on to staff report PW 1943, Re-Simco NE well construction. Jason, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. What you have in front of you here is the Simcoe Northeast well construction. For those of you who may not be familiar, the town of Simcoe is fed by all groundwater supplies. We currently have 8 municipal wells on the books to feed that community. At one time we did have 9. This well, or series of wells, actually there's 2 being proposed here. There's 1 in the ground, which we had done testing on. The engineer has determined that we need a second well in order to get the adequate volumes to be able to continue to safely supply the town of Simcoe. It is to award the installation of this second well so that we can continue with the development of this well field in the northeast corner of Simcoe. You can see that on the map that is attached to the report. It's basically off of the old rail allowance off of Old Highway 24 near Clowett Road. This is, at this point, just for the drilling and some of the general testing that goes along with that well. It is a minor portion of a larger overall project. If you have any questions about this, I gladly answer.
Questions? Councilor Columbus.
Mr. Jason, is this line going to run down the former rail line, the pipe, to the water treatment plant?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Columbus. The exact route of which way they were going to pump that has not quite yet been determined. There's been some discussion with the engineers about exactly whether we would pump raw water over to the northwest water treatment facility, or whether the water quality, if it comes back good enough, we could do a lesser treatment style on site at that location, in which case it would be more likely that we would probably just pipe it down that road, but those details have not yet been finalized. The primary purpose at this point is to identify an adequate supply of quality water. So once that is done, then we would kind of figure out those types of logistics.
Okay, thank you.
Further? Okay, I need a mover or a seconder. Councilor Rabbits. Further? Councilor Taylor. And that staff report PW 1943, awarding of contract PWE 1945 Simcoe NE well construction be received as information, and that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a contract for the firm of Arvik Drilling for tender PEW 1945 in the amount of $323,958.86 net HTS, and further that the bank's groundwater engineering limited be retained as the geotechnical engineer to manage the, and I may have killed it, but for the project to complete. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the next one. Excuse me for a minute. Staff report PW 1944, award of contract for Dover Arena Air Handling Unit replacement, budget amendment. Here again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. This is, again, an award of contract for the replacement of the air handling unit at the Port Dover Arena. This is original equipment that is approximately 30 years old. We did put it out to tender and have come in $6,000 over our original budget estimate, and are looking for your approval to proceed with the replacement of this unit.
Questions? None? Councilor Columbus.
I move the recommendation is printed on page 115 of our agenda package.
Okay. Need a seconder? Councilor Martin. All those in favor? That is carried. Award of contract to the Delhi Well A3 and 3B. That's the next one we have. Just a minute, I'll need to find it here. Go ahead. Staff report, Delhi Well 3, and I've read it. Any questions? Jason, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. This is another award of contract relating to upgrades to some of our water sources. This is for wells 3A and 3B in Delhi. Those are located just off of the Wyndham West Quarter Line Road, just a short jaunt down the road from the existing two wells there. The intention of this installation would be to provide supplementary supply to the community of Delhi. which may allow us in the near future to decommission the old Lehman's Dam facility, which is located across the other side of town at the Lehman's Dam. And essentially, I will draw your attention to the fact that this is a budget amendment in the tune of approximately $600,000. And I will just draw your attention to the fact that it was primarily due to the fact that this project has been on the books and ongoing since 2008. The regulatory landscape has changed drastically in the time period. One of the major drivers of that, which is talked about in the report, was the switch to requiring a full 7-day pumping test, which was not a requirement back in 2008 when the budget was approved. This is something that has come on as an MOE requirement or MECP requirement in the past few years, basically as a result of a lot of the source protection activities and studies that need to be done in order to establish a new municipal supply that is a groundwater well. So if you have any further questions, I will gladly answer them.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. Through you to Mr. Godby, is it normal to have 22 packages picked up and only 2 returned on a bid?
Through the chair to Councilor Martin. In a lot of the more complicated engineering projects like these, especially when you're dealing with times where you're going to have hydrogeologists who are interested, you will have electricians, you will have pump suppliers, you will have all the various subtrades. In order for them to accurately put their bid packages together, a lot of them do collect the documents. And when they do, they are always recorded as well as a potential bidder. So that is one reason that you will frequently see in some of the bigger engineering projects, the number of people who picked up the bid is greater, significantly greater than the number who may actually choose to bid on the work.
Thank you. My second question I might either throw to finance or to our CAO. Not specific to this report, although over the past 2 or 3 weeks we've just seen a consistent amount of budget amendments coming from our friend over there. Is there any such reporting that can be brought to council either over the summer break or after the summer break, just touching base on where we're at with our budget? I think I could certainly benefit from using this as a learning experience to see how a few short months in, where we are with budget and whatnot.
James?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Martin. So twice a year, and we're trying to do it 3 times a year, we do a capital status report. And usually with those reports, we do cover what we budgeted versus what the expenditures are. However, we don't specifically go into the bid documents as a result of the budget. And what I'll do is I'll take that back to my staff and see if we can maybe adjust the next one to include something like that. The other comment I'd like to make is one of the symptoms of these results, in addition to what Mr. Godby has been saying, is sometimes the reason why we do our capital budget in October is so we can get these bids or these tenders out before the start of the calendar year, because then we have all the contractors are eager and willing to go. Well, however, because of the election this year, we were a little bit late with the capital budget. So I know Public Works and CSD have been seeing their tenders coming back not as competitive as they could be as a result. But that's just, it's a transition thing.
Okay, thank you. So, and when can we expect the next report to come forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, we want to do one as of May 31st. So I would say at least it must be September would probably be the month we'd expect it.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question to Mr. Godby. If I get this right, we've already put in the wells. and they're all ready and they're tested and they're good, now we have to hook them onto the system. Is that what this particular tender is for?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Passen, yes, that is correct. The wells have been, they've gone through their actual approval process and been fully tested, and this will basically install the well house as well as the treatment equipment and the transmission main to tie it into the existing system.
And do you have a rough number on how much it costs to get where we are today already?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Passen, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I believe that is something that could be pulled.
Councillor Columbus.
So, Jason, these wells 3A and B were actually installed in 2015. Then they were tested for a quantity, I guess. And now we're looking for 2.7 million to install a pump house, well pumps, and the interconnecting water main with Site 2, right? Is that the basis of it?
Through the chair to Councillor Columbus, this is for the award of 1.47 for the construction works.
Okay, I was looking at the overall project, 2.7 million. Thanks very much.
Okay. The staff report PW 1945, award of tender PWE 1942 Delhi Wells 3A and 3B upgrades be received as information, and that the bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a contract with the firm of Built, I guess I should say, General Contracting Limited for tender PW 19-42 in the amount of $1,474,197.12 net HST, and further, that the overall 2018 awarded capital budget be increased from $2,772,000 to $2,703,000, with funding to be provided by the debenture proceeds and rate. All those in favor? I have a mover and a seconder. Okay. Councillor Columbus, and I need one more. Councillor Michele. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to staff report PW 1946, re-PW 1875, contract award engineering for Long Point Causeway and Bridge. Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. This is the award of contract for the engineering services for the Long Point Causeway as well as Long Point Bridge. Those are two separate capital projects which we have, for the engineering purposes, are rolling those together so that we have one continuous engineer of record on the project. It is a budget amendment in the sense that we are expecting about $117,000 shortfall in the engineering component of this project. Overall, we are still within the budget for these two combined projects. I would like to note that we are also have applied for $5 million of funding in the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the Northern and Rural Stream. I do believe we expect the results of whether we will be receiving that funding to occur sometime over the summer months. Is that we expect that to be brought back to us sometime soon. Okay. I will also note that we were made aware that the Telecommunications Advisory Committee has also at their meeting passed a motion where they were going to hope to direct public works staff to engage some internet service providers. That information has already been passed on to our project engineer for this project. And they will be engaging some of the local ISPs to look at incorporating some of that installation work when they do the design work for these projects. projects. So if you have any further questions, I will be happy to try and answer them.
Councillor Michele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jason. Jason, a similar question that Councillor Martin asked about the previous project. We had 18 companies got packages, and only, in this case, only one submitted the proposal. Am I correct in assuming that that's the reason why we have the weighted chart? Does that help us determine whether or not this one proposal is within some kind of reasonable price range?
Through the chair to Councillor Michele, that is one thing you will notice with a lot of engineering projects is when we do an RFP for services, the intention of that is to evaluate all proposals that are received in order to essentially weed out the marginal, those who can marginally perform for us. In all engineering projects, we do have a standard benchmark score of 80% as opposed to there are others that only use 70, with the intention being that when we're trying to engineer a long-term solution for something, we don't necessarily want to put ourselves in a position where when we go through the full evaluation process, we might not get the quality that we really desire. In specific to this project as well, just some of the complexities of the causeway itself and the fact that we're looking at a bridge and a road reconstruction through a wetland. That also, I think, narrows the field of players who are capable of performing those types of engineering services for us. And at the end of the day, the engineering staff at the county are very satisfied with Parsons and with their reputation and their ability to complete the work. So we did not have any concerns with the fact that there was only one bid.
Jason, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, since we are kind of on this topic, I wonder if I could have another question or comment. I don't think this is any kind of news to members of council that this project is a very large project. It has been a long-standing project. There have been some delays. I think also that most, and this is where perhaps my own knowledge will come into play, I would say with regard to this project, most of the communications I receive from residents in that area and people from Ward 1, I would say 95% of their concerns are with the bridge. They don't really think that the Causeway Road is of such urgent importance to have it fixed, but they basically, and I'm going to suggest as well, that the bridge itself is in an emergency state of repair. And I have been suggesting for some time now that perhaps we need to change our focus or change gears a little bit on this project and treat them actually as two separate projects. The bridge first, the causeway next. And with some hindsight, I kind of believe, as some other members of council also I think will agree with me, that the environmental assessment on that entire thing altogether at the same time was probably maybe a little bit ill-conceived, maybe better to have had the environmental assessment done on the bridge only and get that taken care of. That's the safety concern, honestly. The causeway is not an issue for drivers at this current time, other than, obviously, as we've heard earlier tonight, the high water levels. But the bridge is, people are actually told me that they're afraid to cross it. And so I am suggesting, if we can, and I have had some communications with the mayor about this, that I'm wondering if council will consider that we direct the mayor to negotiate this portion of the project with the Ministry of the Environment, with a view to getting the bridge completed on its own before the causeway. She has assured me, and of course, she's not able to confirm that here tonight, but she has assured me that she would be able to make the necessary calls and emails during the course of this week and bring back that information for us a week today. I'm not sure, I may need to ask the clerk, but I'm thinking, maybe I'll just ask if council has any questions or concerns about what I've just mentioned.
Councilor Columbus?
I totally agree with Councilor Michelli. This causeway, the road itself, there's a lot of roads in our county that are a lot worse shape than the causeway road. But I'm looking at the recommendation here, in the second paragraph, I think we're about $12 million short, the way it reads. Unless I'm reading it wrong, it says $1,372,682. And I think it should read $13,276,000. Okay. Oh, it's just the engineering. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, Councilor Columbus. It is only for the engineering.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Rampassen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to approve this, design all of it at once. That's step one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we got to fix the bridge first, because the equipment they need to fix the road won't be able to get across that bridge until it's fixed. So, but we'll leave that to Public Works to stage that process. But my question is more so, I can't believe that bridge is going to cost $7 million. It's not that big. It's not that wide. It's not that long. And it's not over a river. It's just balancing the water from a marsh to the inner bay. I would hope the engineering firm would use some sort of out-of-the-box thinking of different methods rather than, the tried and true spend a lot of money on a bridge system, like maybe the prefab structure, and you put one in and then the other one beside it, so that you don't have to build a third bridge to drive on while you're rebuilding that bridge. I'm hoping that we got some innovation and new ideas and try to bring that price tag down. But again, I will leave that with staff. And as to the engineering, that has to be done irregardless. We can tender the project separately. We can do all that later. But you sort of want the design all encompassing to make sure that you don't end up designing a road this high and a bridge down here, right? So I would move the recommendation to get the engineering done. I don't want this held off for another year or another year, because we did have some complaints earlier on about how bad the road really is. They can't tell because it's underwater, right? So.
Okay, I have you, Mr. Michelli, I have Martin, and then you as well. Go ahead. You want to put it to him, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor Martin. Yes, with regard to Councillor Van Passen's comments about the cost and the scope of that bridge project, I am, with the help of some residents, and I've been in discussions with the mayor about this, that I think we can, and of course in coordination with Public Works, I think we can come up with a more creative solution that will serve the needs we have and hopefully not cost the county as much money. That is definitely very much in the forefront of our mind in that area. And further to that, I do appreciate everybody mentioning that the bridge is the problem. I would say, in fact, I might suggest that the bridge is the problem in the county right now. I would really like to kind of go ahead with the mayor's suggestion that we council direct her to get in touch with the Ministry of the Environment to move that bridge portion of this project forward. And so I'm looking for perhaps some support. I may like to put this in the form of a motion if council would support.
Okay. If someone wants to move it and second it, we can do that. Councillor? Okay. Councillor Martin?
I can second that motion, or I can look. Sorry, was the original recommendation moved at this point in time? Okay. then maybe it just needs to be added to the original recommendation.
Through the chair, there's a couple options here. What might be the easiest is to just add that as long as the mover's okay with it. You can add that additional direction to the mayor to speak to the Ministry of the Environment, or you could certainly have it as a separate motion. But as long as the mover's okay, then I personally would recommend to just add it.
Thanks, Madam Clerk. I think that that's the way I would prefer to do it, just for clarity, and go with that. So, Madam
So
Clerk, do I?
You're moving, and you're seconding? Okay. Do we have it? All those in favor? That is carried. So what do we do with the rest of it? Is that all part of it now, or what? Do we, okay, all right,
So,
as long as it is.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah?
I'm sorry, so Madam Clerk, you got what I have?
Yeah.
I'm just, would you mind just reading it back for council for clarity?
Through the chair to committee, I would just need some time to wordsmith it, but the general context would be that council direct the mayor to negotiate with the Ministry of the Environment to move the bridge portion of the project forward.
Go ahead.
Madam Clerk, I'm wondering if we just, for further clarity, before the Causeway project, would that be reasonable?
That's a good one. Yep. Have we voted now? I hope. We're done, okay. That's it. Staff report PW 1947, re-award of contract for College Street reconstruction phase 1, Waterford. Jason, boy, you got a lot of stuff here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the last one I believe I have this evening, so I'll stop asking for money once
No. Maybe
Oh.
two. You're here till tomorrow morning.
I retract that. Sorry, Mr. Chair, through you to council, if you flip to your site map, this is an award of contract for the College Street reconstruction. This is phase 1 of the proposed construction works. It includes College Street West in Port Dover, Arthur Lane, Norfolk Street, and John Street in kind of the northwest quadrant of the town of Waterford. It is a budget amendment in the amount of $283,000. In general, the two factors that kind of threw this one out a little bit were the cost of wastewater servicing, basically just through known experiences recently in the area doing the excavations. There's been it's just become more involved to do some of the sewer installations and reroutings required in this portion of town. The other aspect being road construction, and that's just a generalized increase that we've seen in a lot of the cost of asphalt in this current year. So if you have any further questions, I will gladly answer them.
Questions? Somebody want to move something? And seconder? Councilor Rabbit.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. I'll move it as printed on page 133 of our agenda, the staff recommendation.
Seconder? Councilor Columbus? Okay, that staff report PW 1947, award of contract PWE 1964 College Street reconstruction phase 1 in Waterford be received as information, and that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a contract with the firm of Elgin Construction Company Limited for tender PWE 964 in the amount of $3,401,592.86 and net HST, and further that the approved 2019 capital budget be amended as outlined within staff report PW 1947. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to Staff Report PW 1949, Swimming Pool Road Culvert Replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council, this report is the reason why I thought I was done asking you for money. I didn't want to talk about it. However, the long story short of the background of this is there is an approximately 52-meter, 7-foot diameter culvert which crosses under Swimming Pool Road. It actually conveys what is known as Deer Lick Creek under the Swimming Pool Road over to Big Creek. It was identified to staff that there was some washing out occurring. So if you actually look at attachment 1, that's kind of the site map showing the location of the culvert. And if you scroll over to page number 2, attachment number 2, which is page 142 of your council agenda package, you can see on the north side we have the culvert inlet. On the top side of the page we have the culvert inlet. On the bottom part of the page you can see a culvert that it does not have any dirt around it anymore. And essentially that was this spring. That is the outlet of the pipe on the basically east side of the road. And essentially what happened there is, if you look at the photo, the waving ripply effect along the outside of the pipe is actually where the pipe has rotted through and water is actively pouring out the sides, which has washed away all of the road bank to the point where you can see in the distance of the photo where the pipe actually goes back into dirt. That dirt used to come up to about 5 feet back from the end of that pipe. So when staff discovered this, you can see we immediately netted the area off. We dumped a couple 100 tons of gabion stone in around there to solidify the road bed and prevent any further erosion in the area. We had the county's engineer of record for our bridges and structures run out there and basically provide an OSIM style bridge inspection, which is kind of the higher degree of a bridge or structure culvert inspection that they do. Their report came back basically recommending immediate replacement of this culvert. We then again had them go back just as a quick, is there something we could do as a more of a short-term solution to this problem? Like, could we replace some of the parts on the ends just to kind of carry us through so that we could take a step back and budget for this and bring it forward maybe next year? In their professional opinion, the answer was no, that we could not afford to wait another year. So they recommended that it needs immediate replacement. As a result, I am here today telling you that we have a pipe in danger of imminent failure. We have a short window in which to work within the cold water stream. We've already consulted with LPRCA on this, and basically our window of time to do the replacement because of the cold water stream is July 1st through September 30th of any calendar year. So our recommendation will be to allow us to waive the purchasing policy and have the firm of G. Douglas Valley Limited, or the Valley Group, which is our engineer of record for bridges and structures, complete. They're the ones that did the assessment, complete the engineering, design, and contract administration to get this pipe replaced as quickly as possible. As a result, we are also proposing that we have a culvert on Gilbert Road that is kind of been on the books and going on for a few years. We are proposing halting all work on that one as it is not in a state of imminent failure, and we will defer that until 2020 in order to help kind of soften the blow of this unbudgeted expense. So, if you have any questions, which I think you may, I will gladly answer.
Questions, Councillor Columbus?
Yes, Jason, I remember when that heavy spring rain came and the farmer came early to my house explaining what the liability was here. So he did a good job explaining it. It's important work that has to be done to reduce our liability as a county. So I will move the recommendation as printed on page 139 and 140.
And passing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke with the interim director a little while ago about Gilbert Road. That's very little short stub of road. I don't think that culvert is any different condition now than it was 40 years ago when we used to go play in the water by it. But I don't think it's in any concern of imminent failure. I'm sure the neighbors will understand if that gets put off for another year so that we can solve an immediate problem. I do have a couple other suggestions in the budget where maybe we can stop projects before they start because of all the unknowns that have popped up so far this year. But like one of them, maybe they're from different budgets and it makes no difference, but we've got $250,000 in the budget for the little courtyard out here. You know, is that really a priority when we've got roads collapsing? The sand salt domes at the west yard at $300,000, is that something that is immediate, or can we get one more year out of what we got? Because how many budget amendments, or how many projects have we approved that didn't have a budget amendment? So maybe we've got to go start cutting out some of the things that we wanted to do. We had $110,000 for the cast iron pipes in Port Row, and it seems to me we're already doing the whole line. We should be able to lose that line item because we're replacing it all. Replacement of the standby generator at Gilbertson, with all the issues associated with possible restructuring, we've got a standby generator in place. If this is just a replacement as a regular program, that's $60,000 budget item. You know, is it time that we looked at some of these things before we are tendering them and go through that whole process? Just put them all off for a year because we've had too many things go wrong already. But I will second the motion to get this done.
Okay. Councillor Rabbit?
Thank you, Chair Geisens, and through you, I think I'm going to direct my question to James Johnson regarding the financial aspect of this and issuing long-term debentures. I don't want to assume that, you know, the reserve is in such a poor state that that's why we're not defaulting to funding it through that source. I wanted you maybe to provide just a little bit of context as to why we go through a debenture process for this particular expense. I imagine that might also be a little bit more timely to get that approved rather than going through a reserve account, but I don't want to be making too much assumptions, and it is quite a large amount of money to be debenturing, and I want to provide you, I realize you've provided us with some information in our agenda here, but if you could maybe comment on why you're recommending the use of debentures for this particular culvert, I would appreciate that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Rabbit. I would have to double check our financing policy. When it's something that's brand new, we debenture. If it's a replacement, then we would use existing reserves. This is a replacement and we're debenturing, so that sort of contradicts our policy. So my assumption is we don't have a reserve that specifies culvert replacements. That is the likely issue with this, which is why we would issue debentures for it.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, if you go back to page 132 on a previous report, the projected balance of the roadway construction reserve December 31st, 2019 is going to be negative $28,673,165.
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Yep. second? All those in favor? That is carried. We have one more, and it's on page 5, something that I think that Councilor Martin wanted it brought forward, so we're dealing with that one now. That's yours.
Through the chair to committee, this staff report was under consent, but it was pulled earlier on this afternoon for discussion. I'll just do a brief presentation on it, and then I understand there will be some questions. So I'm basically just here on behalf of Andy Grizel. He is the author of the report. And the clerk was directed by council on May 28th to present amendments to the BIA Business Improvement Area bylaw. That's for the Simcoe one, as well as assist the board with the election. And as you know from last week's council, the appointments have been made. This report and draft bylaw fulfills council's direction then in its entirety. And the bylaw itself will be before council on July 9th. The biggest change, just to highlight, this bylaw is the transition to a board of management, which will not be in effect until January 1st, 2020, and that allows for a transition period. And I just want to, on behalf of staff, apologize for the error on page 2 of the draft bylaw, noting that it should read Simcoe and not Exeter. That was something that we did catch pretty much right after print, of course, and our apologies for that. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from committee.
Questions, Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our Deputy Clerk for that. I have a few questions, and I'll keep it very brief. Actually, through you to Finance, $4,700 for financial services. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on what the financial services are, and the reason I ask is specifically because I read through this report, and a lot of these suggestions that I wanted to draw attention to are based around the amount of time it took us to this council to get the BIA approval and whatnot, and we were looking for financial information that, is that something that we have or can have in the future through the financial services that we offer the BIA?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Martin. So with the Simcoe BIA, historically, Norfolk County has done the books for them. So we do their accounting, they use our purchasing policy, we pay their invoices, and so on and so forth. And so that's the reason why that charge is there. There's also two small components related to that charge. There's an insurance component and an HR component. Where I believe we've provided those services to them as well. With the new bylaw, they will now be an arm's length to Norfolk County, and they'll do their own books and so on and so forth, which we think is great. I think they should be independent with that. It's consistent with our Delhi BIA. They do their own books as well. And just today, actually, finance staff met with two of the members of the BIA to start the transition process. So that was great news to hear today. And if there's any more questions related to that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I know that the business owners as well as council members requested some of the financials, so that's helpful. Thank you. And then there is an outstanding balance that the BIA owes to the county. How does that get cleared up, and when can that be expected to be cleared up?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, that's a good question. That balance, I believe, started about 2009, 2010, and it crept up to about 80,000, and that was just, that's a reason why I would like the arm's length on someone else doing the finances, because if they spend more than their budget, we were sort of carrying them for a little bit, and then we started a repayment plan with them. They repay $10,000 a year, or if they have a surplus, that also goes towards the outstanding amount. And I believe there's about 2 years left on that for them to repay it.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving along through the actual bylaw on page 10 under purpose 7A. I wanted to float this out to my colleagues, especially the Simcoe council members. 7A, oversee the improvement, beautification, and maintenance of the municipally owned land, building, and structure in the BIA area, beyond that provided at the expense of the municipality generally. I found this comment to be very vague, considering we are creating a new bylaw and this new council initiative is looking to hold this BIA very accountable. I don't know if this needs to be firmed up with different wording, or if there are any specific examples that my colleagues would like to see added in for accountability, or I will pass it over to the deputy clerk for some language.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin and committee, I agree. I think that that's a really good idea, and especially when we're trying to innovate and be a little bit more modern with our approach and have more transparency and accountability and so on. Putting stronger language than oversee would be a benefit, I believe. The only thing I would like to check, and if it's okay with committee, is that is language specifically from the Municipal Act. So that, and that's basically where we're getting the language for the bylaw and the purpose of municipalities to have a business improvement area. So if it's okay, I would like to check with Andy, as he's the author of the report, and then we can certainly advise before the final version of the bylaw comes back on July 9th.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. I did happen to run into a member of the executive committee on the BIA as I was walking over here, and they had concerns regarding where the insurance would come from at this point. And I would just like to say that liability insurance and content insurance are still provided by the county. That's correct. That was provided to me by Mr. Johnson throughout the meeting today. The executive committee and the BIA would also like an opportunity to present some comments on this to everyone, likely through email throughout the next week, which will be great for the clerks to also provide some of their comments on some of the loose language. But all in all, I am quite happy with the bylaw.
Councillor Columbus. Yes.
Yeah, just to follow up, I too have been just getting an email here from one of the newly appointed BIA members, and they would like to review as a board this document. So hopefully they'll be meeting this coming week if we have to deal with it, finalize it next week. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one more comment, and again, I want to bring it back to the pace at which this council was able to assemble the BIA, which was not very swiftly for many reasons. Looking through this bylaw, I was keeping in mind efficiencies and moving forward a little bit quicker in the future, and I would like to see something added in here that speaks to the posting of the financials publicly. I can look to our deputy clerk if that's something, or maybe finance, that the county should be doing, or that the BIA should do through the county. I'm not sure what that looks like, but in an effort to be transparent and keep the ball rolling on future BIAs, I'd like to see that posted somehow.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, I think that is also a good idea, again, from that accountability and transparency perspective that we're really moving towards. I would think that with the establishment of this Board of Management and that more arm's length organization that the BIA is transitioning to, it would be at their responsibility. So again, I can bring that back and talk to Andy before the final comes back. Just to highlight, within this is the requirement that they provide the financial statements to the county, so council, by February 28th of each year. But again, if council is desirous of having the budgets and the financials posted, maybe that can go through their minutes and it could be public that way. But again, I'll follow up.
So what are we doing with it now? Nothing? Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. Mr. Johnson put his hand up to make a comment there.
Okay.
Thank you. So through the chair to council, I just wanted to make it clear that we're asking for the BIA's financial statements by February 28th and not the audited financial statements, because the audited financial statements are done with the Norfolk County financial statements, and that's per the Municipal Act. We consolidate their books and our books, and then we present it to you either at the end of June or beginning of July. So so they wouldn't be able to get audited financial statements until they do our audit, which unfortunately takes a little bit longer than a typical business.
Go ahead.
Will there be an interdepartmental charge of sorts for that process there? No?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor, so our hope is the interdepartmental charges will be wiped out, and then the BIAs, again, at arm's length, they'll be responsible to prepare their own documents they have to use the same auditor as we do for Millard's, and then they would prepare the financial statements with the information that they provide them. So it would be a direct relationship between the auditors and the BIA rather than going through us.
Further? So what do we do now? A mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Rabbit, Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That is carried. Go ahead.
If I may, I'd like this item pulled next week. I just want that on the record now so that everyone knows it is pulled for further discussion next week.
Yes.
I just think it's appropriate to have the BIA be able to make their comments and whatnot, so.
Okay. Other business. Councillor Rabbit, we'll start from you. Sorry? Oh, sorry.
No announcements this evening, thank you.
No.
Just those that was.
Councillor Columbus.
Well, just on Friday, I had the pleasure of meeting with the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry. Came into the area with Toby Barrett to announce Family Fishing Week, which is this current week right now. He just came in quickly and left. And it was interesting that he actually worked at the Nanticoke Generating Station for a period of time, and this was the Honorable John Yakubuski. Thanks.
Nothing tonight.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one issue in our council information package. The Township of Warwick is circulating comments regarding enforcement of safety on family farms, and I'd like that on the agenda for next week. That I'd like to endorse that recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Michele.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. I'd just like to let everyone know that Lawn Summer Nights is returning to Simcoe on July 26th. There's room for 18 teams, and the cost is $200 per team of 4. All funds raised go to Cystic Fibrosis Canada.
Okay. Go ahead. You have something you want to
Yep,
tell us about?
very, very quick, just a friendly reminder that tomorrow is our Delhi Business Licensing Open House. So just throwing it out there, last week we had 2 councillors attend the Port Dover one, and I believe it went very well. And I look forward to having some of the Delhi and area businesses come out, or anyone in the county that is interested in the revision to the bylaw that we're working on. Sorry, it is at the Delhi Arena in the lounge upstairs, starting at 5 o'clock, and it goes until 8 p.m.
So I guess we get to adjournment. Can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn the July 2nd, 2019 Council and Committee meeting at 9:41? All those in favor? We're done for the day. Thank you.